Welcome to this week. My name is Jalili Adebi Adegboyega. I'm your host for today's edition of This Week. It's so great to be with you, and we're happy that you are here to spend time with us live and after the fact. This week, as you all know, is a live bi-weekly program on Saturdays at 2 p.m. UTC, 3 p.m. West African time, 4 p.m. Central African time, and 5 p.m. Eastern African time. We discuss about arrays of issues, ranging from serious to comical. We welcome you to engage with us in the comments or at leadersofafrica.org/live. Do join our Discuss community, and of course, hit that subscribe button to subscribe to Leaders of Africa on YouTube. Ekabo, welcome. Guys, how are you guys doing today?
Good.
We're great.
That's
How are
good
you?
to know. I'm doing good, and I'm so glad we are back on this week. And it's been a lot of positive feedback about how this week is shaping events on the continent of Africa. And how have you been doing, Eva?
Oh, I'm well, thank you.
Oh, that's good to know. And what about you, Peter? How are you doing today?
So far, so good. The semester has concluded. So we are now in research mode for the summer period. So feeling good.
No, that's good to know. And Violet, and how's it been with you?
Oh, I'm great. I finally went and got that vaccine.
Oh, you got the vaccine? Oh, and I'm so glad to. I think I have a gift for you today, Violet. And it's a quiz
Sounds
question.
like a quiz question.
Yeah, and this quiz pertains to one of the most popular countries in Africa. Just to give you a kind of hint, there was an event that happened 2 days ago, a tragic event, a plane crash that involved the chief of army staff and 11 other people who died on this tragic occasion. Which country did this happen, Violet? And what is the name of the chief of army staff involved in this plane crash?
No idea at all. I need
What a gift, Anna. Wow.
We will all give up on the second question, but I think we know the first one. Is it Nigeria?
Thank you so much, Peter. And this tragic event happened in Nigeria yesterday, and it involved the chief of army staff, Ibrahim Atayiru. He was recently made the chief of army staff, and unfortunately, he was attending a program. He was to attend a program in Kaduna, but he had a plane crash, and everyone on board died. We share our condolences with the great people of Nigeria. We share our condolences with the family of those that lost their beloved one, and we are the leaders of Africa. We'll continue to have them in our prayers, and we'll continue to pray for Nigeria and that peace reign in the country. And Peter, since you build out Violet out of this quiz question, so what is it that has been on your mind this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to start in perhaps an unusual direction. And I think this is on my mind because the Research Methods program at the Leaders of Africa Institute begins tomorrow. And then next week will be the Research Methods Masterclass, which will begin as well. And so what's been on my mind is issues of research. And particularly today, talking about research ethics. And this May 28th, that I should say, the Global Ethics African University Workshop is beginning. So this is a workshop to look at issues of research ethics for scholars as well as students in African countries, right? And one of the big concerns right now in conversations in research is how do we advance the quality of the research that we're doing, as well as the methods that we're applying, but how do we weigh that against some of the ethical concerns that arise? So you see a lot in my field of political science, the rise of these survey experiments, right? So we're using various different stimuli on surveys, for example. We also see lab experiments as well in my field, or field experiments as well. And so the question becomes, as we're applying these new methodological approaches, Are we doing it in a sustainable way? Are we doing it in an ethical way? And this Global Research Ethics African University Workshop, again on May 28th, is looking at these issues and building the resources and the toolkits available for us to think about some of these questions in a way that is not only sensitive to ethics, but also sensitive to some of the concerns that are particular to doing research in a setting in an African country, for example, or in communities. So this is what's been on my mind this week. So I'm curious what others think about this issue of ethics.
I think that's a very interesting and very, very timely topic. And before I even give my thoughts, I think the first or a nice place to start would be one's definition of ethics, because how do you define ethics as a researcher as you're going into the field to conduct research? Because I think that the way that one defines ethics is going to determine how they are going to go about conducting that research. Because when we look at the different types of research that are going on in the different disciplines that we all come from, you'll find that sometimes some disciplines are into more of like the traditional approach, where they go into a community and then, they're conducting all this research, but the community is not necessarily a part of the research process. And then you'll find more collaborative types of research, like the community-based and participatory research, whereby, the community stakeholders are basically part of the research process. They are looked at as, equal partners. And so it looks, to me, it would appear that they hold, as much as, of course, there's a universal code of ethics to research, but in a way, it's differential in these different research angles. And so, Peter, maybe I would throw the question back to you, since you brought the topic up, and ask, how would you define ethics, so that we would know how best to tackle this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Peter, as you reflect on that, I also want you to reflect on the issue of the place of institution, in enforcing and implementing issues related to research ethics in Africa. And in doing this, I also want you to bring in the experience from the leaders of Africa, the trainings we've been doing for researchers on the continent, for policymakers on the continent, and how this actually dovetails and lay foundation for what we are beginning to see as an increasing attention to the issue of ethics in research in Africa.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I also like the question that Violet, you raised. So I'm going to talk about that first, at least. And that question was, how do we define ethics? And there could be very different approaches or sort of thoughts on that question, as there are. And we're not going to get into a philosophical discussion here on Saturday today, per se. But I think there are some common universal principles that most researchers, regardless of setting, keep in mind on a general level. And this is something, coming back to your question, Ghana, we have talked about quite a lot at the Leaders of Africa Institute. And I think this boils down to, two things that you want to think about. One is the benefits of the research, right? And having those benefits felt equitably. So when something happens that outcomes from the research, particularly those who participate on the research, that there should be some benefit there. And on the other hand, you have the risks or the potential concerns that are there. And research is all about ensuring that the benefits far outweigh the risks, right? Knowing that every different research has different risks to not only the participants in the study, but also the research and the results that may come out of it, right? And I think we've all been in this period of pandemic, and we've had these conversations, right, about the issues of trialing the vaccine and who will be the ones that will trial the vaccine, right? Those questions are questions about whether there are certain risks to participating. But then now we're in this distribution phase. So Violet, you mentioned getting your vaccine, where we are now on the team all vaccinated, right? And that is a question of whether the vaccine distribution is being distributed, in a way that is equitable after the research is done, particularly for those who perhaps participated in the early trials. So I think research ethics boils down to weighing some of these concerns. What are the true risks that are there? And sometimes they're apparent, sometimes they're not apparent, right? In my field, those risks may be something that are quite indirect. And for those of us in social science, right? Particularly when we're doing interviews, we're doing surveys with people who are quite vulnerable politically in their country or economically or socially, right? So they may be apparent, they may not be apparent, but we want to really think about those risks and weigh those against the benefits of the research and have a true assessment. So I think that's what it boils down to. And I think the Leaders of Africa Institute and the Research Methods Program really emphasizes how do we think about this balance and think about the true risks.
Okay, so that's good to know, Pierre. So I like to know the other dimension to the issue of teaching ethics as part of the graduate, undergraduate, and general educational process in Africa. It's one thing to talk about ethics in research, but it's another thing to have an institutional foundation upon which such an important component of research is based upon. Eva, Gloria, this is an opportunity for you guys to come into this conversation. Based on your educational experiences in Africa and your continued engagement with several educational spaces in Africa, do you think we have that institutional basis that is required for ethics in research to actually take a foothold on the continent?
I think that most institutions have like certain principles and values that their researchers have to follow. That also has to do with applying for IRB, from the various institution.
And the IRB, just for our audience to know, an institutional review board is a board that oversees research that you have to get approval oftentimes within one's institution. Go ahead, Eva. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes. So I know that on the side of IRB, it's something that they enforce a lot. I know I had friends. I didn't really do research when I was undergrad. My senior year, I didn't do a research that required me to go and collect data, primary data. So, but I had friends that has to go on the field to collect data, and they have to go through this IRB process. So I think it's there. Most institutions have their own standards or their own principles that every researcher have to follow. So I think they are trying their best. The other thing is, do we have the resources? Are the resources enough to ensure that researchers are supported when they go on the field and they start embarking on data collection and stuff like that? So for me, the issue has to be with the resources. They are trying their best with the limited resources they have, but how do we help them get more resources to be able to help more researchers that are also interested in collecting data on the field?
So on this issue of resources, go ahead.
Before we get into resources, I just want to add to what Eva said. Personally, my experience going to the Namibia University of Science and Technology, I didn't get involved with research that much, although in my last year I had to do a semester-long project, but it was heavily technology-based, so I didn't do a lot of going up there and collecting data. But when I went into my graduate program, what I realized is that I had very little knowledge in terms of how to do research and every issue surrounding research, issues of ethics that we are discussing today. Personally, I do believe that many institutions do have standard guidelines that students have to follow. But what I would have loved to see is that these things be taught to students earlier on, even in your second year, starting out in your second year, third year, because there's a lot to consume when it comes to ethics, and also to keep in mind that things differ depending on where you are, the context that you are. I mean, you can learn in this institution, but if you're doing research in another country, there's a lot that you need to learn. Personally, I would like to see institutions starting to teach research earlier on, starting in your second year, studying incrementally, so that by the time you get to your senior year or you go into grad school where you decide that you're going to write a thesis, you won't be learning everything in that year. So that for me, that was the major concern that I had with our institutions. to start teaching students early issues of ethics, issues of how to collect data, and all these very, very important details that at some point in your life, you will have to collect data. You will have to do research of some sort. So ethics need to start very, very early.
Yeah, so thank you
And
so
Ghana,
much.
just to add to what Gloria has said, if you'll permit me, just to add to what Gloria has said, because she did mention something along the lines of, context matters a lot, because you may be taught in one institution, but then you're conducting research in a different country or a completely different cultural context. And I think that a good place to start and a good thing as students are being taught about research is the whole concept of positionality. And I think that this is very, very crucial for every researcher, because in the traditional, ways of doing research, many times this was not a very big issue. At least it was not emphasized, in my opinion, especially when you think about positivist forms of doing research. But I think positionality is very, very important, because again, context matters so much. So if as a researcher you don't evaluate your positionality going into the field, then it's going to become very hard for you to understand the ways of knowing, your own ways of knowing, the ways of knowing of the people among whom you are doing the research, and how you need to frame that research for it to be of benefit to the people for whom it is intended to be of benefit to. So I think positionality is very, very, very crucial as the starting base for training researchers.
So I love that you brought up this idea of positionality and reflectivity in relation to the broader conversation on research ethics in African university, and some of the pivotal issues that need to be given a lot of attention. But I would like us to lose track of a very important issue about resources, which could be institutional resources and human resources. And here I'd like to bring in Peter back to the conversation. I'm aware that at the Leaders of Africa Institute, there has been a lot of effort put in place to train the next generation of scholar practitioners, and even to support a lot of African university in the areas of building that resource base necessary for them to build something on, particularly in the area of research ethics. Peter, could you please educate our audience some of the effort that Leaders of African Institute have been making in this regard, and how that is going to assist African institutions generally to build on something, the human capacity that the Institute has been producing to actually make this a reality?
Mm-hmm. I think it builds on something that Gloria said, which was really important in my mind, which is the fact that research ethics should be something that one learns at the beginning of one's research journey, which arguably should start early in one's career, right? I always like to do some research with freshmen or first years in university level, because getting them involved in research and sort of searching out and answering questions that are interesting to them is something that is worthwhile, and it's an important journey. And all of us at Leaders of Africa Institute and Leaders of Africa enjoy that research journey ourselves. So I think starting early with research should be accompanied with starting early with a conversation about research ethics. So within the research methods program, for example, at the Institute, the first set of discussions are about issues of ethical research, right? And I'll put up on our screen from the initiative that we were mentioning that we started our conversation with, their Researchers Pledge. And I think some of the things that we talk about in the research methods program relate to that Researchers Pledge, right? To do no harm, enable flourishing, put people and the planet first, be aware, be brave, be safe, invest in our own learning, so on and so forth. So you can see that on your screen. And I think the Leaders of Africa Institute really uses that approach. And as well as that, also deals with something that Violet mentioned, which is the fact that every context is different, right? The issue of harm, the issue of risk is defined very differently given the context. And scholars at the Institute come from different countries. This time around, it's over 10 different African countries, very different contexts, from Ghana all the way to Uganda, for example, right? And again, I'm coming at it from the political perspective, but when we think about the lay of the political land in these countries and we're asking questions about issues of participation and democracy, there are different dynamics that are taking place on the ground. And so one of the things that the Institute does is sensitive to is these differences of context. And I think this is an important point to keep in mind as we think about a Pan-African conversation about some of these things, is coming together with our different contexts in mind to think about, what are some of the similar things that we can work on, we can collaborate and think about when it comes to ethics. And then how can we perhaps, see how that looks like in different countries. In addition to that, how can we make countries harmonize in the way that they treat researchers and research as well, right? So I think it's not only just responding to context, but also as researchers thinking about how we make the context conducive to a way that we can do research, that research can make an impact in people's lives. And I think that added part is also what the Institute does, and what I'm really thinking about when it comes to this event, such as the Global Research Ethics workshop coming up on the 28th that I put up on your screen earlier.
So that's good to know, Peter. Is the Leaders of Africa going to be this part of this event? And how is this event different from the one that the Leaders of Africa has been discussing for some time? I have heard you and a couple of our colleagues at the Leaders of Africa, discuss with different scholars that the Institute has produced. There is a need to have an engagement with different institutions in Africa on how to institutionalize research ethics and on how to, to develop a means through which they can leverage some of the scholars that the Leaders of Africa Institute has produced. So how is this particular event different from the one that the Leaders of Africa Institute has been contemplating, Peter?
Yeah, I just think very briefly, I think the event is an important one. So let me see if we can put that back on our screen here. So there's the invite there. So while we're speaking about it. So I think this event is a beginning of a conversation that has been started with some researchers around the globe. You can see the different institutions that are involved in this toolkit and the broader project. So I think the conversations are very, very similar, right? As what's going on at the Leaders of Africa Institute. So similar context, but again, one of the things that the Institute does very well is it has a sustained conversation, a more hands-on or mentorship approach to having some of these conversations, because everybody's research project is very different. So even though we've got the toolkit up here, the particular question one is asking, the particular context matters. So the Institute is more in sort of the game of being sustained in terms of that mentorship, in terms of that conversation related to each scholar and each fellow's research project. So that's what I would say. We're all building on each other. We're all in conversations with one another as global researchers. But I think that added component of the mentorship and personalized approach is key here.
Oh, that's good to know, Pira. And I think we need to move to the next thematic issue on this week. And before I do, Eva, it's your quiz time.
Okay.
And there is a country in Africa. The country has been in the news, and we've discussed this country a number of times on our program. And this country, the president, a female president, recently reversed a major COVID-19 policy of her predecessor. She specifically requested that people make use of masks and respect this mandate in public spaces. Which country is this, and what is the name of this president?
The country is Tanzania.
Thank you so much. And the name of the president is President Samia Suluhu, which some people also call her Solehu. So Gloria, what is on your mind this week?
Yeah, so this week I came across an interesting conversation regarding digital banking in Africa. So as we know, traditional banking has not worked for a lot of people due to various reasons. So that created an opportunity for top telecom operators to provide mobile services to millions of people. We are familiar with M-Pesa, which started out in Kenya and moved out to East African countries and even some Central African countries. Other big operators in that area are Orange, MTN, Vodafone, Airtel. All these companies have been providing mobile money services. Now, last year, the pandemic helped increase activities in this sector. There's been an increase in the number of people using these services. Mobile money transactions volumes increased by 23%. In terms of number, that gave 490 billion US dollars in money that was transferred using mobile services. And active users also increased by 18%, bringing the total of users to 159 millions. And so this has opened up the digital banking sector to increased competition, not just between telecom operators, but also competition coming from China. So telecom operators are worried that the rollout of new technologies like the 4G telephone networks with affordable smartphones from Chinese vendors, brands like Huawei, Xiaomi, and all of these smartphones that are coming out of China. So their worry is that these technologies is threatening the low-tech monopoly of mobile services because, you don't need much to send and receive money on the mobile phone. But with a smartphone, this opens up a door for big banks like major lenders like your Standard Bank and First National Bank to offer full-range digital banking services to millions. And so that has been sort of some kind of contention that are coming up lately in this sector. So the prospect of a booming digital banking industry is creating a lot of activity in this sector. So African banks want to bring basic mobile accounts. So now that there's the opportunity, we have different technologies and mobile phones. They're looking at creating mobile accounts that anybody anywhere can have access to just on their cell phone. And on the other hand, tech operators also are adding services to the initial basic money transfer services they had because they also want to keep their customers. So that's what is going on. It's a very interesting sector to look at because I mentioned the tech operators, but the majority of them are Western companies. They're complaining about China, but they're also coming from outside. So it's very interesting what's going on right now.
So Peter, I'd like to know your perspective from a socio-political dimension and from the dimension of who are the losers and who are going to be the winners in this situation, particularly from the perspective of businesses in Africa and job and employment creation. Your thoughts on this, Vera?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential. It certainly has transformed a lot of commerce in Kenya because that was a country that really experimented with the M-Pesa very early on. And so it certainly opened up the accessibility of some form of banking as well as payment. So I think that's very useful. I will say this. I think we've been talking a lot about the AfCFTA in terms of integration. So one of the key questions that I have in mind, there's two questions actually, is, how will the expansion of mobile money and different payment mechanisms facilitate cross-border transactions on the purpose of trade, right? Particularly for countries that have invested a significant amount of money in their digital capacities and they're hoping to get a broader continental market. How does this also facilitate some of those transactions? Are we going to see that boom a bit more? Because as we know from our experience at the Institute, taking payment from different locations and moving it outside are restricted in some countries, right? So this is one of these barriers that is present. So it raises that question. The second question comes out in my mind in terms of potential concerns, what Gloria said, which is these companies that are now in this game, they are quite large in terms of their number, and they're also to some degree quite few in terms of who is in this game. In terms of the massive number it could be, right? Seems to be a lot of companies, but they really are focused on a number of these big telecoms. And so what is going to be done to sort of, have regulation around this market, as well as the, regulation around the banking sector in general is another question that I would have. And what power does this give to these companies, whether they be Africa-based or Western-based or now China-based?
So your questions come back to the issue of the potential gains and the potential losses too. Just like you mentioned, the African Free Trade Continental Agreement might stand a lot to gain from these emerging development in the financial industry. However, I'm sure, Violet, you are very particular on issues of social justice. Because one of the issues that Gloria touched on and that Peter also touched on is that we have very large companies and very few companies that are domiciled in the Western world or in some of these countries in the global north. So how would this affect upcoming industries in the continent that are small-scale industry? And what do you consider to be some of the possible disruptive effects of this on employment opportunities creation, especially for women in Africa?
Well, Ghana, I don't even know where to start, because as Peter was talking about, as Peter was talking about, the potential implications for, the AFCFTA, in my mind, I was thinking about the direct costs to the users of these services, because I know every time you move and receive money, you have to pay some form of tax and then, some form of service fee and things of that nature. And I was just trying to think about it in terms of economics, that, okay, now if we're going to have, because it's like Peter rightly mentioned, it's in the form of an oligopoly, like there's very few players, but who hold so much power. And I'm wondering, okay, if the market opens up to potentially more competition, how does that directly impact the pocket of a woman in the village? Does she end up having the same service for a lower fee? Because, the big dogs are fighting, and so they're trying to provide incentives for their customers. So do we directly get more money in our pockets? And then now when you talk about in terms of employment, it's tricky. And right now I wouldn't really be able to imagine all the potential fallout of this. But it's a real thing, because sometimes you find that when you have foreign companies working within a country, many times they bring in their own people. And so that cuts away the locals from the pie, because then if they're bringing in their own employees, then the people within the host country are not directly benefiting from it. I don't have the statistics with me offhand, but sometimes that happens. And then when it comes to the whole gender dynamics, again, that is very tricky, because as much as, yes, I am a sucker for gender mainstreaming, but at the same time, I do believe that we need to put technical capacity ahead of gender, but at the same time, in the same vein, create systems that enable both genders or all genders to be able to be competitive to get these opportunities. So I would say that at the end of the day, it comes back to the kind of leadership that we have in our countries, like I always say. But at the end of the day, it comes back to political will, because these contracts are negotiated with our governments. We do not sit on those tables. So we do not even many times know the contracts that are being negotiated, depending on which country you come from and how much political transparency exists. So it comes back down to the political will of our governments and how they are negotiating on behalf of the people. So if a country's government is selfless enough or cares enough about its people, then it's more likely to negotiate better terms, whereby you could say, okay, we need to have a certain percentage of the employees coming from this country. We need to negotiate better pay. We need to make sure that there's equitable gender mainstreaming and other benefits like that. Then we can say that, okay, we'll have more positive benefits of this. If not, it's likely that it's just going to be a playground where foreign companies come in, but all the money is repatriated out of the country, and then the locals have nothing left. But Gloria, I would like to thank you for introducing me to Orange. So we used to have it in Uganda, but in my head, it has always been orange. So when I had to say orange,
I was thinking the same thing. Funny enough.
Yeah, we have it in my country, and so I'm used to knowing it, pronouncing it in French. So I went with orange.
Well, I feel,
and
I feel a lot more sophisticated. Orange.
I'm glad that you mentioned, Violet. I'm glad that you touched on the cost, like how much the average person is actually paying to have access to these services. So the interesting thing is, you heard me earlier on mention the numbers, how the services increased, how the numbers increased. But what's interesting in all of this is that revenue for these telecom operators actually dropped while all these numbers are increasing. It dropped by 24%. So the company that ran this research is GSMA. It focuses on global mobile communication for development. So what they observed is that during 2020, different governments were putting pressure on these telecom companies to reduce the commissions, the fees that people have to pay on the simple transactions because of COVID. And so this is a good sign that actually governments can step in and regulate some of these activities or help facilitate the transactions, and also as we're seeing competition coming in, but more so in light with the free trade agreement. We talked about it, Peter touched on it, and Violet also touched on it. And so I think there's a role for governments to play, as Violet, you've just explained, in order to make sure that the people who need these services are the ones that are benefiting from this.
Gloria.
I think that I just want to add something to it. I think that the mobile banking thing in Africa is evolving. We don't have to forget about that, because for me personally, it became popular just last year to me. For the first time, I started hearing people saying, "Send me money to Momo." Momo is the MTN mobile banking system that they have in Ghana and other places, and one of the things we have to look at is that it's brought banking to a lot of people. Currently, World Bank did some studies and they found that about 350 million Africans do not have access to a bank. They are unbanked. But with the introduction of mobile money, now people have access to mobile money. They are able to transfer money from different places. And I remember that someone was telling me that their mother, who is a market woman, doesn't need to go to the northern part of Ghana to buy corn or to buy yam. What they do is that they send the money, and the supplier just give them the yam to the truck drivers, and they just deliver it to her. At first, she has to go all the way to the north to make the payment because she didn't have a bank, and the supplier also didn't have a bank account. But with mobile money, she just send the money, and the person gets it on their mobile money. That it has really bring about ease in terms of transaction for some of our market women and some of the people in the informal sector. Right now, what we have to be thinking about is that how do we improve it? How do we improve these services to make it easy? And as you, Violet, and Gloria was talking about the fact that regulations are needed, because sometimes if regulations are not enforced, some of these mobile banking companies will take advantage of the people through their commission by increasing the commission, which becomes a burden on the user. So I like the fact that governments are coming in, putting pressure on them to reduce the amount of charges that they are putting on consumers. In addition to that, I believe that competition is good. The more we have them, the better the services, and also the lesser the charges. Because if I'm with MTN and I feel like MTN is charging me too much, and I hear about Vodafone's own, and Vodafone own is simple, the charges are small, right? I'll just jump to Vodafone. So we need a competition, but we don't also have to forget that we need regulations to enforce this mobile banking system, because they all form part of the universal banking system. And if they are not regulated well, they could cause financial crisis.
Yeah, and just building off of that, this whole issue of digital payments, I think, and we've been talking about mobile money in particular in the context of digital payments. But if we broaden that out, We can think about this proliferation of Bitcoin that we've talked about in previous programs as well as another sort of digital payment approach, right? So one of the questions that I have, and again, it's something that's worth studying a bit more, is, if we see the growth of a healthy mobile money sector, does that take away from sort of the use and cultivation of Bitcoin, or are they going to run parallel to one another? Or is this just an overall push to digitize payment schemes and to perhaps allow them to flow not only within countries, but between countries as well? So I think it's very interesting that we're seeing this discussion about the proliferation of mobile money alongside the proliferation of Bitcoin and investments people have made in Bitcoin, for example.
Yeah, that's true, Peter. And for me personally, the jury is still out on Bitcoin because one of the, I mean, there's been a lot of talk around global warming and, trying to limit our carbon footprint. And then I'm beginning to see a lot of literature surrounding the huge carbon footprint of Bitcoin. So I don't know, for me, the jury is still out on that. But then just to add to what Eva and Gloria said just a while ago about making the case for regulation, is the fact that the Momo fees and the commissions that people pay is a mostly regressive tax if you think about it, because as people's wealth progressively increases, the proportion that they pay for these services becomes significantly smaller than the overall amount of income that they have. So when you look at the people who use mobile money the most, who tend to be the poor people who do not have access to the banks, those are the people for whom this is a regressive form of taxation, because they end up paying a much larger proportion of their overall income to access this service. So as much as it's there for them, how equitable is it at the moment? So regulation needs to really look in this area.
So back to this issue of regulation, Gloria. Because when we look at the regulatory environment in most places, either in the global south or in the global north, or wherever it is in Africa as well, the people that get to discuss the issue of regulation, they are not the potential people are the losers in this conversation. Yeah. So how do we bring them to be part of this conversation? The poor people. And as you reflect on this, Gloria, I also want you to think about the issue of banking. Banking means it has several components. There's a component of transferring money. When I transfer money to you and you receive it electronically, it doesn't mean you have a bank. It doesn't mean you are cultivating the habit of saving money. You're just a recipient. I've just changed the means through which you are receiving money. So do we see this global electronic transfer of money as something that is actually disincentivizing the culture of saving money, banking money? And because it has been a major issue that the World Bank and other development organizations in Africa, they are particular about. They want people to have bank. But this issue of money transfer seems to be addressing ease of transferring money, moving money from people to people. Is it actually addressing the problem of banking in Africa? The number of people who have a bank account that are using their bank account effectively well.
Yeah. Interesting questions. Well, I'll try my best. So first of all, in terms of having the right people to advocate for the community, that is very, very, very important. There needs to be partnerships between governments and local people. So the governments needs to have people who are going out in the community and actually listening to people, listening to their stories and collecting evidence of what their experiences are with using these mobile money services. And so governments need to be intentional in that sense, because unless you actually go to where people are, see what they're experiencing, you won't know exactly what it is that they're experiencing. So I'm glad that efforts were made in 2020, but I just don't know if these efforts will continue beyond the pandemic. I would love to see these efforts continue, where the government engages the public and then collect that information, then go to these telecom companies, because the average person may not have access to these telecom companies, but governments do. They have the rights to put certain regulations in place for any company that wants to conduct business in their country. And so there needs to be more collaboration between government officials and the public. And in terms of your second question having to do with savings, that was one of my concerns. Like, all you do with the mobile services, at least when they started, is just send and receive money.
Mhm.
There's very little that you can do with those services. And that's why, personally, I'm glad to see this competition going up now, because what this competition is going to lead to is real banking, where you can have a checkings account and a savings account and have access to other products like insurance and other things. So that is that's actually where the worry is for telecom companies, is that with the increase of new technologies, new smartphones, it will become easier for people to do more than just sending and receiving money. So it's an interesting development, which I think it's a positive one and could lead to answering the question, Ghana, that you just brought up.
I
I
mean,
want to add to that. I want to add to what Gloria just said, and also to answer your question: that is mobile money making people not to save, and also is it causing kind of a shake in the traditional banking? I believe it's yes. If you go to the traditional banking, it's so expensive to save. It's so expensive even to open a bank account. If you're a poor person and you have like 10,000 Ghana cedis and you want to put it in the bank, you don't have a bank account. When you go, they're asking you for ID card. Sometimes they're asking you for electricity bill. I mean, sometimes a lot of people do not own their houses. Sometimes the documents that they're asking people is just beyond them. And also, our system that most countries do not have a national identification card, and they had to resort to using voters ID card, right? And also that one has had a number of issues. So in some places, even if you want to open a bank account, you need someone to vouch for you. So it's even in the first place expensive for a poor man or a poor person to open a bank account. They have to go to all this hurdle, all these things to open it. And the other thing is that if they open a bank account, the other thing is if they need a loan from the bank, another wahala. So why should they save their money in a bank when it's so expensive? For instance, to open an account, they need a lot of documents they may not have. Two, if they need a loan, they have to have a house as a collateral, which a lot of people may not have. So with mobile banking, for someone who is in the informal market, it saves them a lot of headache, right? They can send the money to their supplier, and also they get their goods back. And the other flexibility in mobile money is that you can keep your money with mobile money for some time. I've seen that. You can keep it for like a week, a month, and you can go and withdraw, take it whenever you want. So if I'm in the informal sector, this has taken a lot of burden for me as to think about, my supplier, my customer has brought the money. I need to find a bank and put it in, but I don't have a bank account, and it's a stressful process to me. So, they send the money through mobile money. Okay, let it be in mobile money. Next week, I have to go to the market and I can go and withdraw. So it's save a lot of headache. But the thing is that for me, going forward, I just feel like there have to be some kind of collaboration between the traditional banking system and also these mobile money vendors to mesh these things together, so that if I have a mobile money, I'm a consistent customer with MTN Momo, I should be able through that, be able to have some kind of banking with EcoBank or any bank on the continent, right? So through my mobile money, it should be the mobile money should be able to help people to connect traditional banking. So that is where I want to see it go, and I know that some mobile money, I think M-Pesa is thinking in that direction, where people can save their money for extended period of time and also can go and withdraw at any time. So that is what we want to see. We want to see the innovation, because the traditional banking have to catch up with this innovation that is going on in the fintechs. They have to. So I like that.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Eva, and everyone for your very engaging contributions to this issue of mobile money. And I can assure you that it's a topic that will continue to engage development practitioners.
Oh,
And as we keep wrapping our hand around this issue of mobile money, we need to start thinking about issues with technology. Technologies always raise social concerns. They always raise the issue of equity, and they always raise the issue of who are going to be the gainers and losers of a particular technology. And so these are very important issues that our leaders in Africa need to pay a lot of attention to, that policymakers need to pay a lot of attention to. It's not just about the technology, because many times when we focus on efficiency, we lose the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is more important than a focus on efficiency. And from this, we are going to move to Eva. What has been on your mind, Eva?
Eva doesn't get a quiz question?
No quiz question for Eva today. She's also
Hey,
Hey, answer the question about Tanzania. You forgot?
that was
Oh,
me.
okay.
That was my
Yes, my bad.
Oh, I see the bias from Violet. Oh, okay. Gonna give you more quiz questions.
What's on your
Anyway,
mind today, Eva?
yeah, and another issues that I've been thinking about a lot has to do with the irregular migration that is taking place, especially on the northern part of Africa to Europe. We've seen that in a couple of years now, a lot of young people and even mothers breastfeeding their babies are making this dangerous journey to Europe for greener pastures. And it's been going on. We've been seeing pictures of dead bodies. We've been seeing pictures of boats um, sinking and people swimming for their lives. And it's been just been going on and on and on. And the media coverage has been focusing on some of these things. And we've seen a number of images about it. But my question has always been, what are our leaders doing about it? So this week, another similar incident happened, and this one was around Morocco. So what happened was that Morocco, about 8,000 African migrants, some from Morocco and some from countries in the sub-Sahara region, made their way to Ceuta. Ceuta is a territory of Spain that is bordered with Morocco. And a lot of them went. Spain was not happy with that. So what happened was that they deployed a number of troops to come and take control of the situation, because they have this territory that is bordered with Morocco, and all of a sudden you have 8,000 African migrants getting into that region. The question is, how do you take care of them? How do you control them? Because most of them want to use that route to get to Europe. So when they deployed their military, their troops, they were able to send back about 5,000 of them. But the funny thing is that Morocco intentionally relaxed the border between their country and also the territory of Ceuta, which belongs to Spain. And with Morocco, they did that in retaliation against Spain for treating a militant opposition group in the Western Sahara. I mean, you know the situation in Western Sahara where Morocco is claiming ownership, and there's been a lot of contention going on. So one of the militant groups that has been fighting Morocco was taken to Spain for medical treatment. So Morocco wasn't happy about it. So what their government officials did was to relax the border and let the immigrants go into the Spain territory. And actually, the funny thing is that on Tuesday, even the Moroccan Minister for Human Rights, who is called Mustafa Ramid, suggested that his country has been justified in easing its border after Spain allowed the militant leader to receive treatment in their country. So for them is a justification, but actually at the end of the day, the two countries came into agreement and they were able to, close the border to prevent more people into Sudan and preventing them from reaching Europe. So for me, this has been going on for so many years, and I don't see much being done about it, especially from the side of Africa. So, what for me, the thing is that how do we deal with this, and what is the incentive to deal with it, and also what is the incentive not to deal with it? Because we've been talking about it. It looks like every week we see pictures of African migrants going through the Mediterranean Sea and other things, trying to get to Europe. A number of them die, some made it. And when they go, they are deported. Some still want to go. So what is driving this, and how do our leaders respond to this effectively?
So, Gloria,
You know
let me
what
bring you
rubs
into
me the
this.
wrong way?
Okay, go ahead, Violet. What is driving this, Violet?
Oh no, I'll let Gloria answer that question. But I was just going to say that you know what rubs me the wrong way? The fact that our leaders are willing to play politics with people's lives just to make a point.
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
should be immoral. Like seriously, really.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I wanted
Gloria,
to
please
say
go
the
ahead.
same thing. Yeah, you can see that for the events that happened recently, it was literally geopolitics between two countries and the conflicts between two governments, and regular people, innocent people have to pay with their lives, and that should not be. We shouldn't do things like that and play politics with people's lives. We know these governments know that a lot of young people are struggling in some of these African countries, and they're constantly looking for opportunities to escape, go via the sea, trying to get into Europe. And you can't take that for granted. It's a serious issue. It has been going on for a very long time, as Eva said, and we can't take that lightly. To be honest with you, Ghana, I have no idea. We can say that it's the usual thing. Young people that don't have access to work, they don't have access to opportunities. There are so many issues to consider. It's not a clear-cut solution, and there's not one particular reason why people decide to leave. The solutions to these issues have to come from various sectors. It has to come from the government. It has to come from the private sector. What can we do to create more opportunities for our young people, whether through education, whether through other vocational training, job opportunities, entry-level jobs, and all of these things. And also, it will take time to shift mindsets. I grew up in the DRC, and young people constantly thought that abroad life is better. That's where you do well and all of that. And there is the part of the government stepping in and creating opportunities for young people. And there's also, I don't know, the aspect of shifting mindset slowly, promoting small startups that are starting on the continent. Plenty of young people are doing amazing work where they are based. We need to encourage that, promote that, so that other young people can see that you can actually find opportunities where you are.
Yeah, usually one of the things to reflect on in this regard is that usually people want, you look at the health of an organization for who their members are, who wants to be a part of it, right? And we can almost think about countries in the similar way, right? So if you like a place, you're going to stay, you're going to embrace it, you're going to be a part of it, you're going to contribute to it. So what is always sort of puzzling in this case, and maybe these conversations are taking place, is that in the broader society or within the government or in other pockets in a country, is there a form of embarrassment about why people are not being able to really truly embrace and participate in their country and essentially fleeing it in desperate conditions? So what does that reflect about your organization, or in this case, your state, if people are so, willing to leave, right? And this Morocco case, as has been mentioned by Violet and Eva, is quite intriguing in the sense that there was this no sense of sort of embarrassment on on behalf of Morocco in that case. So the pictures that were put up, you could see that there were a lot of Moroccans and North Africans more broadly that were in the group that were making this journey in this particular case, right? So why is that the case? Well, I think there are a lot of incentives, perhaps, on behalf of some of these governments to let people leave in many ways, right? It solves for them a lot of concerns, right? Number one, it solves this concern of this, as we've been talking about, sort of issues of poverty, issues of sort of a youth bulge, and
Right.
the youths and their prospects. So it may solve some of that. It also solves the question of the big concern here is remittances, right? So you start sending people abroad and they land themselves in Europe, they're going to send money home. So the economy is sustained in large part in some countries through through the flow of remittances. Right. So it's this strange situation where you want an embrace of your organization, in this case, your country, right? But at the same time, you see this lack of embarrassment that seems to be operating here because there are these more pragmatic interests that are at work. Leaving aside the diplomatic row that we've been talking about between Spain and Morocco in this particular case.
So I'm so glad that you brought up this issue, Pira, and because when I was way back in 1996. When I was in the Polytechnic as an agricultural student over there in Lagos. One of my roommates, three of us were living together, and his name is Tunde Shinaike. He went on this same route we are talking about today. So I've been in the knowing of this route for a very long time. And I could recall in our conversation today, when we were having this conversation, what was the motivation? That the risk was just too much. And he looked me up in the eyes and he said, Ghana, you know what? It's worth more than the risk. And I said, why? He said, take a look at the lives of Nigerians that are living in the US, that are living in Spain. I don't know better off than most of us back home. And I said, well, it depends on how you look at things. And this is where I'm going to. The role of the diaspora communities in incentivizing this. The images that they conjure back home, that you just need to make it out of your country and you are into real wealth as soon as you get out of your country. So, and this brings the diaspora community in Africa back into that conversation. Some of those that have escaped, that have gone through this route, people see them as they have arrived, as people that once they escape from their country, that was when this opportunity came their way. They don't think about the issue of poverty, homelessness in Africa, in the United States, in Spain, and several of these major countries that they are escaping into. They are not aware that they are dealing with core issues of poverty. Just the same we are dealing with the issues of poverty in Africa. So I think the diaspora community is a big part of this conversation. And a lot of attention is to be focused on the diaspora community so that they will stop sending the wrong signals to people back at home that they just need to escape from their various countries in Africa, jump on the next ship, just make it any way possible. Because once they do, they are going to get into wet. We need to change this narrative from the diaspora so that people get to understand this. And Violet, please come in. I know you wanted to say something about this. I just wanted to mention that point about the diaspora community.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ghana. I do have a question for you, but I also do have a question for Peter, because I know we were discussing ethics, but within the realm of research. But as Peter was giving his submission, it brought to my mind an aspect of ethics. Peter, when you mentioned that aspect of, certain governments willing to, for lack of a better word, sell their populations to other countries because they know that they'll benefit in the way of remittances. In my head, I was like, okay, how ethical is this? Because if I'm part of the government and I'm just willing to let conditions like slide because, okay, they'll go out there, but they'll send money and we'll still benefit. Because it had me thinking about Uganda, and I was reading an opinion piece, and the writer was saying that currently our biggest export is labor to the Gulf countries. And when you see what these people are going through, it is sad. The stories are horrendous, but nothing ever gets done. And interestingly, key figures in the government are involved in this. It's almost like human trafficking, just saying it loosely. So in my head, I was like, where is the ethics of this? Because as a government, really, you're supposed to be looking out for your people and also thinking about, your reputation in terms of, okay, what's your embarrassment factor? But okay, so, and then for Ghana, I mean, the diaspora community needs to change the way that they portray other countries. But now the thing is, how possible is that? Because, I mean, we know for a fact that most of the countries outside of our continent do have like more weightier currencies. So even if somebody sent just a tiny bit of how much they earn, it's still going to make a very huge impact. Some of the diaspora, the point the diaspora want to go back home, want to come back home and build. And then, so someone goes out there and comes back, say, to Uganda and puts up this huge structure in a very short period of time. Even if they say nothing to the villagers, everyone is going to be like, okay, that is the magic chord. I am going out there. So, I mean, how physical is this?
And it's not just the diaspora. Just to quickly add to that, it's entertainment as well. We talked about it one day in one of our discussions. Just TV. Sometimes it's not even one person that you know personally, but the things that you watch on TV.
So now, to close this conversation, because we are really running out of time, Eva, you are so much particular about framing issues from a very development perspective. So what is the development response to this crisis in Africa, particularly from the aspect of governance? What do we need to get right with good governance and attending to the development crisis that may be incentivizing the urge to take the risk moving out of Africa and get into some of these countries in Spain, in Europe, and in the United States?
I think that we've been talking a lot about youth empowerment on our continent. We all know that we have a larger number of youth on the continent, and most of these youth have been empowered through a lot of programs and initiatives that has been taking place in our various universities. But when they come out, this empowerment looks like it's not enough to help them find the kind of jobs that they need. So I think that the talk has to be about investment in our young people. We really need to invest in them. Africa has the right population for its economic growth and development. But the question is, are we taking advantage of it? You know?
Okay.
People, let me finish. We are not taking really advantage of it. We have for the first time a lot of people that are going to school, that are becoming educated. But when they come out, the opportunities are not there. And even if they want to go into entrepreneurship to create a job or a business for themselves, opportunities are not there in terms of getting access to funds and other things. So we have to think about investing in them. The moment we start investing in our young people, I don't think that the idea of going through the sea, going to Europe by using irregular means will even come to their minds. So I believe that we really need to invest in them. That would be my number one focus here.
Yeah, so if I'm so sorry, we have run out of time, and I know you have a lot of thoughts to share with the policy makers in Africa, to share with our audience about what we need to do right in order to address this menace of having to lose a significant proportion of the African population to migrating through the seas to countries in the global north. Viewers, it's on this note that we are going to edit on this edition of this week. We want to particularly thank you for joining us today, live or after the fact. We'll see you again in 2 weeks for this week. In the meantime, please do remember to hit that subscribe button, to subscribe to the Leaders of Africa YouTube channels, and to join our Discuss community for continued conversation on future program alerts. And please do follow Leaders of Africa on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. That is all on today's edition of This Week. See you in a fortnight. Bye.